Okay, Science 30. This is a video on the heart, the structure of the heart, function of the heart, and blood flow in and out of the heart. And so um, we're going to focus primarily on the main structures of the heart. So it's going to be the ventricles, the atria, septum, valves, aorta, vena cava, pulmonary arteries, and pulmonary veins, and then the coronary circulation. By the end of this, you should be able to look at a diagram of the heart, be able to label the different pieces of structures within the heart, and then be able to describe blood flow throughout those different structures within the heart. And so, at its simplest, we could draw a heart, and anytime you look at a heart, you always want to try and identify the four main pockets. There's four main uh, sections of the heart, and they are separated into a left side and a right side of the heart. And the separation between the left side and the right side is a thick muscular wall called the septum. And the septum is designed to physically separate the left side of the heart and the right side of the heart. Now, when we look at the left and the right sides of the heart, one of the hardest things for students to wrap their head around is typically the labeling. It's backwards. And so when you're looking at a diagram of the heart, what we call the anatomical right side of the heart is actually going to be on the left side of your page. And the anatomical left side of the heart is going to be on the right side of the page. And that's probably most simply explained by assuming you're a doctor, you're looking at a patient, the patient is, let's say, in front of you or lying on an operating table. It's always from the patient's perspective. So it is the patient's right side of their heart, but when you're looking at it, the patient's right half of the heart is going to be on your left. And so that's why when we look at a diagram of the heart, the anatomical right side of that individual's heart is on the left side of your page, and then the anatomical left side of that person's heart is on the right side of your page. You have to get that straight and make sure you don't mix that up when you're labeling or describing blood flow, because you'll get everything wrong. Okay, so the right side of the heart is going to receive blood from the body. And so the right side of the heart is going to receive blood from the body in this very first chamber, and it's going to enter another chamber on the right side of the heart, which is significantly larger. This blood that enters this second chamber on the right side then leaves the heart completely and goes to the lungs. This is deoxygenated blood currently, which is why I've drawn it in blue. The blue arrows are going to signify deoxygenated blood that's been received from the body after the body has received all the oxygenated blood. And this blood is returning back to the heart, entering these two chambers, leaving the heart as deoxygenated blood, where it goes to the lungs to get oxygen. Once it receives oxygen, that now red colored oxygenated blood is going to re-enter the heart into a third chamber and extend into a fourth larger chamber where it will again leave the heart, but this time this is oxygenated blood, and it's going to get pumped to the rest of the body where it can innervate everything all over again. Drop off oxygen to the tissues, pick up carbon dioxide, and then it'll re-enter the heart through this first chamber, and then our loop will start again. And so please take away here, two sides of the heart separated by a septum. The anatomical right is on the left-hand side of your page. The anatomical left side of the heart is on the right side of your page. The heart itself is a giant muscle. It's a pump. It's got a pump. In and out, in and out. And so this pump is formed of something called cardiac muscle. And so cardiac muscle is the muscle that surrounds the heart itself. Anything that has the term cardio, cardiovascular, cardiac is referring to the heart typically. Both the left and right side of the heart pump at the same time. So when the left side of the heart and the right side of the heart pump, it happens simultaneously. The difference is usually that the top of the heart, we'll label these in a moment, but these top chambers, the atria, are going to squeeze left and right side simultaneously, and then that'll push the blood into these bottom larger chambers, which are called the ventricles. These ventricles will then squeeze simultaneously at the same time, and it'll pump blood either out to the lungs or from the left ventricle out to the body. So within the heart itself, remember, the heart is a giant muscle. The heart is an organ, and like any muscle or any organ, the heart needs blood. The heart happens to pump all of the blood in the body because that's the function of that organ, but the organ itself, the tissues of the heart itself, still need blood, and it's still making waste. Carbon dioxide is being produced by those tissues, and so that carbon dioxide has to leave the tissues of the heart itself, and it does that through circulation in the heart. We call the circulation in the heart itself coronary circulation. So coronary is a term that describes blood flow in the muscle of the heart itself. And so when we describe this, we need to understand that coronary circulation is the blood vessels on the outside of the heart muscle itself. It's bringing fresh oxygenated blood to the heart muscle, and it's taking away carbon dioxide and wastes away from the heart muscle. There is a left and right coronary artery, as well as left and right coronary veins. The coronary veins take blood into the heart to get more oxygen. The coronary arteries bring blood from the heart to the coronary tissues of the heart. So this is, when we describe coronary circulation, it's kind of like inception of blood flow, right? It's like blood flow within the muscle called the heart, which happens to also flow blood inside of it so it can get to the rest of the body. Okay, now a heart attack or angina is chest pain due to poor blood circulation to the heart. Not enough oxygen would be available in this case, and so you get a heart attack. And so this could happen due to a blockage in the heart or some sort of a barrier or constriction that stops blood flow, therefore stops oxygen flow to the muscle of the heart itself, which would then stop the heart from functioning as a muscle, which is very bad for the body because then you wouldn't have blood being pumped to the rest of the body if the heart ceases to function due to lack of oxygen. So any blockages in the heart can be solved through surgeries, some of which include taking a larger vein from the leg and actually inserting it into the heart to bypass a blockage that's in the coronary circulation. So let's label the structure of the heart before we get any more detailed. So you've got a blank heart diagram in front of you here. You can produce this by Googling blank unlabeled heart diagram. Your notes package posted on Google Classroom also has one of these in it, but if you're just watching on YouTube, these are very easy to access. So I've got a heart. I'm going to start labeling it. The top structure is called the aorta. The superior vena cava, I'm going to go just down the diagram here in no particular order, just so you have everything available to you, and then we'll talk about blood flow in a moment. Right pulmonary artery is on the right side of the anatomical heart. The right pulmonary veins are going to bring blood back to the heart from the lungs. The right atrium is the topmost right-hand side chamber. The right ventricle is the bottom right-hand side chamber. It receives blood from the right atrium, and when it squeezes, it's going to pump blood to the pulmonary circulation. It's going to pump blood to the lungs. There's a valve that separates the right atrium and the right ventricle, and it's called the AV valve, or its full name is the atrioventricular valve. It exists between the atrium and the ventricle. Atrioventricular, AV valve. Very aptly named. And so when that valve opens, it allows blood to go from the right atrium to the right ventricle. And then there's another valve that has to open called the semilunar valve, which allows the blood from the right ventricle to leave and enter the pulmonary circulation via these pulmonary arteries. There's an inferior vena cava, which, just like the superior vena cava, brings blood back into the heart, and it'll dump it into the right atrium. There's an aorta at the top with 3 heads, and there's also a descending aorta at the bottom for lower extremities when blood is ready to leave the heart. There's a left pulmonary artery, which does the same thing as the right pulmonary artery. It sends blood to the lungs from the heart. There's a left pulmonary vein, a pair of them, which does the same thing as the right pulmonary veins. It allows oxygenated blood from the lungs to re-enter the heart. The left and right pulmonary veins are going to allow the blood to drop off into this third chamber called the left atrium, which is significantly smaller than the left ventricle. Blood will move from the left atrium into the left ventricle through another atrioventricular AV valve. When the left ventricle squeezes, it's going to push blood through a semilunar valve, another one over here, which is eventually going to push blood all the way out through the aorta. Okay, so that's our label. Don't forget the septum is that thick muscular barrier between the left and right hand sides of the heart. And please don't forget that the right side of the heart is on the left side of your page, and the anatomical left side of the heart is on the right side of your page. Very important when we label these diagrams to remember that the left is on the right and the right is on the left. Okay, so blood flow. 2 ways of looking at it. If you're a linear person and you want to know the terms first, you can take a look at this right-hand diagram. And if you're a visual person, you can take a look at this picture here. They both coincide. Blue means it's deoxygenated, and I want you to notice when it becomes a purple and then when it becomes a red, because that's going to be where we've actually got our oxygenation occurring. All right, so I always like to start at the vena cava. This is when blood has entered the heart from the body. There's a superior vena cava and an inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava is going to bring blood from the lower part of the body back into the heart. The superior vena cava is called superior, not because it's better, but because it's on top of the heart, and it's going to receive blood from the extremities above the heart, so your head, your shoulders. And so blood enters the vena cava from the top or the bottom, and it is going to dump into the right atrium. The right atrium is going to squeeze during a heartbeat, and it's going to push blood through this AV valve, which is called a tricuspid valve in its most official term, and enter the right ventricle. When the right ventricle squeezes, it's going to push blood a little bit further through a semilunar valve and into the left and the right pulmonary arteries. Remember, arteries, A for away. So arteries always move blood away from the heart. The only difference here is usually arteries are moving oxygenated blood during systemic body blood circulation. In pulmonary circulation, the pulmonary arteries, left and right, carry deoxygenated blood. Because remember, this is blood that has just come from the body, entered the heart. It's now leaving the heart through these left and right pulmonary arteries, and it's going to the lungs. The lungs, during respiration or breathing, is going to oxygenate that blood. And so you're going to get oxygen entering the blood. It's going to turn red in our diagram. And then the carbon dioxide is going to leave that blood and then get exhaled during your next breath. The blood has to then leave the lungs and come back into the heart. So it comes back into the heart through a vein, because veins always bring blood back to the heart. And so now, unlike the rest of the veins in the body, pulmonary veins on both the left and the right-hand side carry oxygenated blood. So this is different than the other veins you learned about for the rest of the body. Pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood because they're coming back into the heart from the lungs. They've received oxygen, and it gets dumped into the left atrium. So it doesn't matter if it comes in through the right pulmonary veins, right pulmonary veins, yes, or if it's coming in through the left pulmonary veins, no matter what, they're going to enter the left atrium. When the atrium squeezes, it's going to push blood through this AV valve, more specifically termed the bicuspid valve, and that oxygenated blood is going to enter the left ventricle. The left ventricle is extremely muscular. Notice this muscle, this beige stuff here, around the left ventricle. considerably thicker than around the atriums and even around the right ventricle. The thickness of the left ventricle is due to the fact that the left ventricle is going to pump at an extremely hard pressure to deliver this blood to the rest of the body, all the way down to your big toe. And so it's got to push that blood at a high enough pressure, so the muscle here provides the oomph to do that. And so we're going to squeeze on this left ventricle. We're going to push blood through the aorta. There's an aorta at the top with 3 heads, and not in this diagram, but in the last diagram, there's also an aortic head that comes down the bottom to go to the lower extremities. Once it's gone throughout the entire body, it's going to hit our capillaries. So it's going to go through, I guess I should say, the aorta, then arteries, then arterioles, then capillaries. Capillaries are the site of gas exchange. The oxygen is going to get dropped off into the tissues. And then the tissues are going to provide their waste and dump those back into the blood. So now this deoxygenated blue blood is going to enter the veins, venules, then the inferior and superior vena cava, and it's going to go back into the right atrium, where it's all going to start all over again. So I always like to start at our vena cava, inferior and superior, dumps into the right atrium, goes into the right ventricle through an AV valve. The right ventricle squeezes, goes through a semilunar valve, enters the right and left pulmonary arteries, A for away. These arteries are going to carry deoxygenated blood, goes to the lungs in the pulmonary circulation, gets oxygenated, comes back into the heart through the pulmonary veins, which are the only veins in the body that carry oxygenated blood. The pulmonary veins then dump the blood into the left atrium. The left atrium squeezes, pushes blood through a AV valve, enters the left ventricle, which is very, very muscular, in order to push that blood out with high enough pressure so it can go to the entire body, out the aorta, into arteries, arterioles, and back into the capillaries, and then the process starts all over again. Okay, quick true or false recap here. All arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. False. This is false, because not all arteries are going to do this. We just learned that pulmonary arteries are the only arteries in the body that actually carry deoxygenated blood. True or false number 2, all veins carry deoxygenated blood towards the heart. Also not true. This is false, because just as with the pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins are going to do the opposite of what they do in the systemic body circulation. Pulmonary veins are going to carry oxygenated blood back to the heart because they're coming from the lungs. Okay, some quick features of the heart before we finish up for this video. The septum, remember, ensures that the left and the right sides of the heart don't mix blood. The left side exclusively carries oxygenated blood. The right chambers exclusively carry deoxygenated blood. You would never want unwanted mixture of those two blood types. The atria have thinner walls than the ventricles. Well, this makes sense. The left atrium and the right atrium, regardless of if they carry deoxygenated or oxygenated blood, they're not pushing very far. They don't need to be very muscular, because these top chambers, or these atria, only have to push blood into the ventricles, which are literally right there through a valve. The ventricles have thicker muscular walls to pump blood. Of course, the right ventricle and the left ventricle have considerably thicker walls because they both pump blood outside of the heart. But it's safe to say that the left ventricle has considerably thicker musculature around it so that it can push blood to the entire body, versus the right ventricle only needs to push that deoxygenated blood to the lungs. It's still far from the heart, but not as far as where the left ventricle is ultimately going to push that blood. Okay, so don't forget the purpose of these valves. The AV valves on the left and right side, and the semilunar valve separating the pulmonary circulation and the aortic systemic circulation. The purpose of these valves is so that we don't push blood into the next chamber and have it accidentally go backwards. Valves always provide one-way blood flow. So we're going to end this video here. I'm going to give you a couple review questions for you to do, And I'll put these answers up right now. So feel free to pause this video here, try to answer the questions, and then here are the answers. Okay, the next video will continue our discussion of what types of blood move through the heart and different heart related information. Thanks.